Chapter 1. A week after Hattie was born, the cats of the sky battled long and hard. While the kittens wriggled over each other, tears dripped through the roof of their nest in the tree stump, soaking even Mother's thick fur. It was the first time they had heard noises like this. They didn't know what was happening, and they were terrified. Mother explained that the great Bubasta was battling with Rufikul, the demon cat. Rufikul had the head of a slave hound and the body of a cat, and his breath burned fire and his claws could freeze the whole land. She told them not to worry though, because Bubasta always won in the end, and meanwhile their battle would wash the land clean and bring lots of prey out into the open for their dinner tomorrow. She said they were hunters and should never be afraid. Despite her words, the bangs and rumbling of the earth made most of the litter mew and hide their faces in Mother's belly. Only Hattie held her head up so she could listen. She pictured Bubasta outside, tumbling and rolling around with Rufikul, and thought how big they must be to make all that noise with their growls and hisses. As the battle raged, a leaf fell in from the top of the stump and landed on her head. It tickled her ears, and she shook her head, but she couldn't get it off. Mother laughed and nudged the leaf away from her eyes. It was then Hattie realized what her eyes were for. Blinking hard, she stretched her eyelids open with all her strength, and for the first time, she saw. Mother's face was huge. It was splotched with black and white, and her nose was pink. She was long, and her powerful tail stretched all the way to the end of the nest. Her eyes were pure light shining out from deep inside, and her fur was all different colours and stripes. Hattie was so surprised she couldn't mew. "Go back to sleep, little one," said Mother. "It's too early for you to see the world." But sleep was impossible for Hattie after learning all that her eyes had to offer. In hours, she memorized every last detail of the stump. By the end of that first night, she knew every detail of stripe and splotch on her brothers' and sisters' fur, the nubby folds of their ears, and the short, stiff tails none of them knew what to do with yet. Hours later, the ginger brother Mother called Scorpius Slasherclaw opened his eyes too. Hattie watched the triangular face transform as the two slits blinked to reveal blue eyes. He went back to sleep almost immediately, exhausted with the effort of seeing for the first time. But Hattie stayed awake to welcome all of the litter into the world. After Scorpius, pretty Alexandria Snowtail was the next to open her eyes, then Calypso Shadowtail, and finally the smaller Tom, Bumblebuzz Terrorclaw. Hattie had already explored every inch of the nest, and knew all the smells of leaf, earth, wood, beetle, and many more she couldn't yet name. And in the days that followed, she grew to know and love all the sights too. Tree roots wound round each other like tangled kitten tails against the walls. Mother said when it was alive, that was how the tree took its milk from the ground, which was its mother. After that first leaf had opened her eyes for the first time, Hattie loved waiting for more leaves to fall into the nest. She would crouch with her paws together, ready to pounce, and as soon as there was the slightest movement from above, her ears would prick forward and her bottom would wiggle. As it fell, bam! She would leap forward and catch it before it hit the ground. They were all different colours, green, brown, yellow, red, and all different shades. She could see veins in them. Some were dry and crunchy, and they were all different shapes. Scorpius was the first to copy her, and soon the nest was a scramble of leaping kittens. Hattie loved sniffing around the corners too. If she pushed over one of the branches, sometimes a tiny creature would crawl out. Hattie would bat it with her paws, watching it run back and forth in fascination. If she wasn't there, the creature would be able to escape. It was amazing to think that her own two paws had the power to make another creature run away, and she could even control which way it ran. Hattie tucked that thought away for later. Most of all, she loved staring up at the lattice of roots above, which sometimes glowed with a strange fiery light. Hattie felt sure there must be something wonderful beyond the roots. She got a hint of it when Mother would return with prey that still wriggled, a mouse, a vole, once even a bird still flapping its wings and squawking. She showed them the different ways to kill and made them take turns in practicing. It didn't happen enough, though, and they often went to sleep hungry. Hattie wanted more. Every day she could feel her legs getting stronger, and it took her practically no time at all to reach the other side of the nest. Soon, she wanted to go outside and catch prey by herself. Mother flattened herself and slinked underneath the root where the breezes came from when she left the nest. All the kittens would try to follow her, but she always popped her head back in at the last minute. "You're too young to go outside," she said. "Enjoy the safety of the nest while you can, because once you're out there, you never go back." It was easy to say enjoy the safety when you weren't the one stuck inside a damp hole with 4 other noisy, scratchy kittens and dead woodlice falling out of the walls, Hattie thought. One night, Hattie thought just a peep outside and a sniff of fresh air wouldn't hurt. She waited until Mother was gone, and the excited panting of her siblings had turned back into soft snores. Then she crept towards the entrance, one silent paw step at a time. She didn't need to crouch to fit under the large root, and the tunnel was wide enough for her to walk upright all the way to the gap where Mother always disappeared. The earth smelled different here, wet, wormy, and full of fragrant mysteries she wanted to investigate. The air was colder, and it moved by itself, ruffling her fur and tickling her whiskers. She breathed deeply, filling her nose with the smells of outside, and her lungs with air so deliciously fresh that it made her dizzy. She stretched upwards and poked her head out. Her eyes weren't as strong as Mother's yet, and she couldn't see far, but what she could see was enough to make her wobble and nearly tumble back down into the muddy tunnel. Before, the nest was her whole world. Now she saw that on top of the nest lived another creature, sitting with its head pointing up. It was a grey creature that was very old and stood very still, whose fur had fallen off. Could this be the creature that Mother called the tree? The one the roots fed? Was it the guardian of her nest? Before she could twitch a whisker, something moved on the ground, and Hattie's eyes flitted to where she'd seen the shadows flicker. A mouse was running straight past her. Hattie's heart thudded, her paws tingled. Mother was chasing the mouse, but she was too far away. It ran towards its home in the undergrowth, its legs a blur, its eyes locked onto the bushes where it knew it could disappear. At the speed it ran, it would reach the bushes before Mother got to him. If she let it get away, they would go hungry again. Without thinking, Hattie dashed out of the shelter and ran after it. The mouse saw her and squeaked in fright, scrabbling in the other direction. But faced with Mother, it turned around again, and in the moment of confusion, Hattie pounced. The mouse struggled, but Hattie pinned it down with her whole weight. "Keep hold of it, Hattie!" Mother shouted. "Use your claws!" It took all her strength to keep it there, but she dug her claws in, and then Mother arrived just in time to finish the kill. Mother flopped to her side with the limp body in her mouth. She let it drop and panted. "Thank Bubasta," she said, closing her eyes. But all too soon she recovered her breath and looked at Hattie with narrow eyes. "What are you doing out here? You know you're not allowed outside. And while I wasn't there as well, anything could have happened." "I just wanted to look. I couldn't help it. My paws did it by themselves." Mother looked from the plump, dead mouse to Hattie and back again. "No harm was done this time, but never, ever go outside again until I say so. Is that clear? It's too dangerous for you outside. Now get back in the nest and take the mouse with you." Despite the telling off, Hattie's chest was swollen with pride as she returned to the nest with a delicious mouse that she had helped catch in her jaws. She woke up her siblings to tell them breakfast was ready. Scorpius blinked once, then snatched the mouse from her and started eating. "Don't be greedy!" Hattie gave her brother a nip to tell him off. "Mother says we have to share." "She also says I should eat first," said Scorpius, his mouth full of food. "I am a growing Tom, and I need more mouse than you." "We've only got one, and there are 5 of us," said Hattie. But Scorpius turned his bottom to her and continued eating. "Let us have some," she meowed louder. Her fur was starting to stand up on its own again, as it did whenever she couldn't control her temper. "I caught the mouse. I should decide who eats it." "Don't be silly. You couldn't catch a mouse," said Scorpius, his mouth still full. "Yes, I can. I went out and I chased the mouse right into Mother's paws. You can ask her." "Liar!" Scorpius pounced, and the two kittens rolled around each other, hissing and scratching. Bumblebuzz and the two girls squeaked in excitement as they watched the fight, batting their paws in the air. "If you two don't stop arguing, I'll send you to the Bluntpaws," said Mother, who came in with dripping fur. All kittens were instantly silent. Images of the terrible giant monsters with rock-like thudding paws reaching out to grab them filled their minds. Mother said Bluntpaws could peel their fur off, stood on their hind paws, yowled all day long, and what they hated most of all were cats. If they got you in one of their wriggly pink forepaws, that was the end of you. Mother didn't have much milk left, so the mouse was all they had to eat that day. Scorpius had the most, and Hattie once again went to sleep still hungry, the taste of the hard-won mouse tail bitter in her mouth. She had only been left with the dry end bits nobody wanted after the boys had eaten their fill. She didn't think about Kelly, who hadn't argued at all about being left with half of the tail.